Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing How I Would Have Booked. The topic for this How I Would Have Booked, WCW One Night Stand. And I got to thinking the other day, what if instead of ECW, they did a WCW One Night Stand in 2005? In an alternate universe, they did a one-off show for the WCW crew to pay respect to them instead of the WCW crew. So this was my idea for what the show would look like. I am going to keep as much as I can in reality. The one thing I will say, there are going to be some people that were contracted to TNA at the time that I put on this card. I'm just going to assume that they could get them, and it made it easier for me to make the card to not look up everybody's contractual status at that point. We got to bend it just a little bit to make it work. So here's how we're going to do it. This is my idea for 2005 One Night Stand WCW style. First off, we start off at the Norfolk Scope. When you think of WCW, there's a few venues that come to mind. The Georgia Dome, the Norfolk Scope. Norfolk Scope, in my opinion, has the richest tradition in WCW and Jim Crockett Productions or promotions, the precursor to WCW. To me, it's a perfect setting. You set up the arena like a Nitro, like Monday Nitro, except for you put One Night Stand instead of saying Monday Nitro, because who knows if they want to use the logo with Nitro that's similar to what TNA or TNT would have. I'm going to probably say TNA a lot in this video. The announce team that I'm going to have, and then we're going to get into the matches. Tony Schiavone, Larry Zbyszko, and Eric Bischoff. I'd like to have Bobby Heenan, but he had already had his issues with throat cancer at this point, and I don't know that he would make it through the whole pay-per-view. Maybe have him come out and wave to the crowd, but that's about it. I think with this three-man booth, you kind of get what you would expect. These are the guys that you've seen on Monday Nitro, that you listen to on Monday Nitro over and over again. They announce the card, they come out just like they would on every Monday Nitro. The Nitro girls start dancing to the ring. We get our first match, and we're only going to book this one card. I'm not going to keep going like ECW on Sci-Fi, but I digress. Our first match of the card, we're going to have Dustin Rhodes in his natural gimmick going up against Ron Simmons, who had recently retired. I would do this as one more send-off for Ron Simmons. Not that there was a problem with the way he got sent off losing the JBL. I just think they're gonna give him one more proper send-off as Ron Simmons when he was a world champion. Dustin has Dusty Rhodes in his corner. Ron Simmons has Teddy Long in his corner just to get those guys on the show because they're awesome. I'm going to give Ron Simmons a win here, give him a feel-good win at the end, make this his official last match, send him off with a win. Next up, we're going to pull some surprises out, some people that may or may not have been seen for a long time in America. And I tried to pay respects to all the eras of Nitro, all the different incarnations and different people of not just Nitro, but WCW in general. All the stars that came from basically when it turned from Crockett to WCW all the way to the end. This match is some of the earlier stars of the show. Too Cold Scorpio versus Alex Wright. Alex Wright, I believe, had already retired at this point a couple years, but he was still young. I believe he would have probably been around 30, 31 at this time, so it's not a stretch to say we couldn't get him back for one more match. I think this is the kind of thing. Here's two guys that at the time didn't quite get the love from the fans that they should have. However, later on, even around this time, you already had fans that said Alex Wright was underrated, Too Cold Scorpio was underrated, and I think this is a way to give those hardcore WCW fans that stuck with it the entire time, see some of the guys that were on the early years of WCW. I'm going to give Too Cold the win here because I like Too Cold personally. I like Alex Wright too, hence why he made the show. I think Alex Wright would be a better surprise, not necessarily needing to win. I'm going to give the win to Too Cold Scorpio here. Just another fun match. Next up, we get Lord Steven Regal, although they'll probably insist on calling him Lord William Regal, which is okay, going up against Finlay. As a surprise, we're going to have Earl Bobby Eaton coming out with Lord Steven Regal, refreshing that Blue Bloods gimmick and having him in the Blue Bloods gear. Again, these guys have wrestled 1,000 times. They wrestled a bunch of times in WCW. Put some of the great matches in WCW history on against each other. Another harkening back to that around 95, 96 era of WCW, where these two guys were tearing the house down on the undercards. Definitely would be a match that a lot of people would love to see. I'm going to give Regal the win here with some help from Bobby Eaton. Just a fun match. Maybe Bobby Eaton slides him into brass knuckles. Just another fun match, another example of what WCW was when it was really good. Two really good wrestlers in the ring doing what no one else in the world could do. Speaking of that, we go to our next match. Eddie Guerrero versus Chris Jericho. Two guys that were didn't reach their full potential in WCW. However, by this time in WWE, they had already firmly entrenched themselves in the higher upper card and main event. Chris Jericho was already a main eventer. Eddie Guerrero was about a year out from being a world champion, or not even a year out from being a world champion and being a main eventer himself. This is kind of them going back and showing how far they've came from where they were in WCW. Eddie comes out with an LWO shirt on. Jericho comes out with a Monday Night Jericho shirt on. Has the poof in his hair like he did in the WCW days. I'm going to give Guerrero the win here because they're building Guerrero to be the world champion very soon. And a strong win over a guy like Chris Jericho would definitely help him on that card, help him on that build to become the world champion eventually. Just another great match that they could have easily booked right here. Now coming from that, I know what you're going to say, and I had to put him in here because he was important in WCW. And he was a big star in WWE at the time, so he has to be on the card, because I'm looking at this as if we were in 2005. Diamond Dallas Page, and that's not who I'm talking about, versus Chris Benoit. This is an homage to the three-way feud that these two had with Raven. I don't think that they would have been able to get Raven in, because if they could have got Raven in, they would have got Raven in for the ECW one-night stand. I think that bridge between Raven and WWE had already been burned at this point, so we couldn't get the three-way match. Next best thing would be DDP versus Benoit. I'm going to go with Benoit picking up the win. Again, they're building him to be a bigger thing. He's going to win the World Championship very soon after this. And yes, I know, Chris Benoit, terrible human being. I definitely understand, but we got to put ourselves in 2005. No one knew what was going to happen a year and a half, 2 years later from this. So he's still looked at very fondly at the time. Now going from that, this is the one match that actually we're carrying over from ECW One Night Stand. Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis. We had to show the Cruiserweights off at some point in the night with how much they meant to Monday Nitro and WCW. We had to put them out there, and what better match than what I think is one of the best Cruiserweight feuds. As you could see, they had a great feud in ECW. Their feud continued into WCW. Rey and Psychosis, something about them, every time they've ever wrestled, they've always had a great match against each other. It's always been a very high caliber match. I think we put this here because it shows, again, how important the Cruiserweights are. I toyed with putting this on first because of how they would have been booked initially, but again, I think we put it here just to say, hey, even though they weren't booked as upper card talents originally, now when we look back, we realize how important they are. Obviously, we're going to give Rey Mysterio the win here. He's the bigger star in WWE at the time. He's the guy that they would want to win. Next up, we have our one tag team match of the night. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, versus Booker T and Stevie Ray of Harlem Heat. Harlem Heat is being escorted to the ring by Sensational Sherry, and the Outsiders are being brought to the ring by Six, aka X-Pac, aka Sean Waltman. This is another fun match showing off two of the great tag teams in WCW history. Again, I toyed with bringing the Steiner brothers in here, but Scott Steiner had an acrimonious relationship with WWE at the time, so I left them off. Plus, I thought it would be fun to put Harlem Heat out there one more time. This would have been about when they started their wrestling school together. So Stevie Ray would have definitely been probably up to it, if for nothing else, to promote the wrestling school. I'm going to give Hall and Nash the win when Stevie Ray turns on his brother to join again with the NWO, gives them the too sweet. Maybe he pulls down his shirt, or they throw him an NWO shirt and he puts that on. Just another homage to what happened in WCW all the time. We would get swerves like that where brothers would turn on brothers. Scott turned on Rick Steiner, Stevie Ray turned on Booker T. booked to join the NWO. I think they all leave too sweet each other, hugging out of the ring, and the outsiders pick up their win. Now, next we have our first of two main events, and when I get to the second one, you'll see why I say it was two main events. This is a match I would actually, if I had full control and there was no backstage politicking, I would make the main event. It's been the main event on the first Nitro, the last Nitro, the first Clash of the Championships, and dozens of other places in WCW history. Sting versus the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Flair comes out escorted to the ring by J.J. Dillon. I'm going to have Sting go over on this one, and we have Sting kind of back in his somewhat hybrid between the Surfer and the Crow gimmick, a little bit of both. Maybe he does it half and half down his face. Obviously, we're going to want Sting to win. Vince McMahon would probably insist on Flair winning because I don't think Sting was ready to sign a contract with WWE and wanted to sign a contract with WWE during this time frame, or else he probably would have. But I think if we could convince Sting to come to a WCW one-night stand and showed that we were giving respect to WCW, he may have signed the contract. And if he did, he's a guy we'd want to go with going forward because obviously, and no knock on Ric Flair, one of the great wrestlers of all time, one of the two greatest in my opinion, him and Terry Funk. Sting is the guy that you're going to have main events with. You're going to have the dream matches, Sting and Undertaker, Sting and Triple H at the time, Sting and John Cena, Sting and Batista, Sting and Randy Orton. There's a lot more you could do with him. Again, no knock on Ric Flair. After the match, Sting and Flair hug, JJ comes in the ring, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard come out, Barry Windham comes out, Chris Benoit comes out, Dean Malenko comes out, Mongo McMichael comes out, Sid Vicious comes out, even Paul Roma comes out, and all of them stand in the ring and hold up the four for the Four Horsemen, basically giving us a Horseman send-off with a majority of the guys that have ever been in there, sans maybe Ole Anderson and Brian Pillman, who had passed away at the time, and Jeff Jarrett, who was already in a different company. But was Jeff ever really a Horseman, or was he a Horseman affiliate? That's one to check. I seem to think he was, but never really officially. Anyway, we get them all holding up the Four Horsemen for a feel-good moment. If it was up to me, that's how we'd go off the air, but there's one guy on the show that would have politicked for the main event, and we would have had to do it because we would have wanted him on the card. The last match of the night, the Giant, aka the Big Show, going back to his Giant gimmick, going up against Hulk Hogan. The Giant has with him Kevin Sullivan, Hulk Hogan has Jimmy Hart. Another feel-good match. You could do it either way, Hogan in the red and yellow, or Hogan as the Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Again, I think these two would have another good match with each other. Hogan, I'm going to give the win to because, of course, Hogan needs to have this win. At the end, everybody in WCW comes out, the NWO guys, the WCW guys, everybody has a party, much like we've seen with WCW, with the ECW guys, I'm sorry. However, the only difference is we don't have anybody to chase off. It's just a party, feel-good vibe. The pyrotechnics start going off. The Nitro girls are dancing. We go off of the air. We end with our one-night stand for WCW. Let me know what you guys thought about that. Did you think that would be an interesting card for 2005? Do you think it was total crap? Is there some people that were in WCW would rather see on this card than others? I know a lot of people are going to say we have to take Benoit off the card. I understand if you say that. It makes total sense, but you're looking at it with 2022 eyes on something that happened 17 years ago. With all that being said, let me know what you think about it. Hit me up down here. And if you made it to the end, give me your favorite WCW moment. It could be anything. It could be the finger poke of doom. It could be the formation of the NWO. It could be Ron Simmons winning the championship. It could be the Cactus Jack Lost in Cleveland videos. Anything you could think of, leave it down here in the comments. Nothing's too silly. Nothing's too crazy. Let's have some positive vibes about WCW down here. If you made it again, smash that like button, subscribe, share the video. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of How I Would Have Booked.